Hello, everyone. Oh, yes, my mic is on, and welcome here to the Daily Quest number 54. Now, this is not the first time I've made big audio adjustments before the cast, but after casting all weekend long, a bunch of people came and, said, you should do this, you should do this with your compressor. I have a pretty complex audio setup. I don't fully understand. Thanks, Enlod. I was not ready for that. Let me destroy those sound effects very quickly. So I'm gonna be looking at chat. I'm gonna be looking for some audio feedback, and I love you, Enlod. But yeah, we're gonna be talking about Brightwing today. Now you'll notice I did a clean shave for the first time in over a year, and I used a straight edge razor for the first time in my life. And I absolutely mutilated my face. Like, feels bad, man. Feels real bad. But my face was smooth like a baby's bottom for a little while before it got all prickly. Brightwing, one of the smoothest heroes in the entire game. She is such a delectable little fairy dragon, the happiest fairy dragon of them all. And chat, you guys are actually beautiful. Okay, so Brightwing, she released about a year ago. She was unveiled at PAX East. I believe it was last year. No, 2 years ago. Oh my goodness, this game is getting old. She was unveiled 2 years ago, I think, at PAX East, one of the first heroes that Blizzard announced after the alpha had begun. And her kit has changed, quite a bit since then. They wanted to really make her a lot different because the style of Brightwing in early play was all generic talents. Like, people were just grabbing Bribe, and they were just grabbing, Protective Shield, and really generic talents that weren't interesting, right? The hero just didn't feel interesting. Her kit was good, but her builds were not. So they've changed her quite a bit, and she's starting to rise back up in the meta, so I wanted to talk a bit about the hero. Now, recently, they buffed Arcane Flare to do a lot more additional damage, basically tying in the additional inner area damage to the base ability. And that has helped her out a sizable amount, because one of the things that Brightwing really excels in, one of the reasons that you would draft Brightwing over some of the other supports in the game, is due to the fact that she has global presence. Now, she is the only support that can teleport across the map to an ally to save them at a moment's notice, and that's a pretty cool power to have. But when it boils down to it, her healing isn't quite as impactful as some of the other supports. She's kind of like Tassadar, where she has decent sustain for the team, but not nearly as much as someone like a Malfurion or an Uther or a Medic, who are really, largely heal bots. What Brightwing offers is just a lot of presence, the ability to soak lanes effectively, the ability to save someone in a snap call from across the map, and a good bit of control over the battleground, because with Phase Shift, sure, she's very mobile, but she has Polymorph, one of the strongest support control abilities in the entire game. I mean, it's instant cast and it's ranged. And the fact that you can just turn someone off, you can just find someone heroicing in the Zeratul Shadow Assault and just say, no, stop that for a second and a half. Or an Illidan that's really being a big issue in the backline. You need an additional moment to try to get that hero out with Pixie Dust. Well, Polymorph's going to allow you to do that. So she's definitely got a really cool kit, and she fits in a variety of compositions, but she's not always the right pick, right? She is definitely a niche, and she's not something that you should be, first picking in the draft, where that would make sense to do with a Tyrande or a Rhaegar, especially right now. So where does Brightwing fit in? Well, Brightwing's a good counter on larger maps. Say we're talking about Sky Temple, where it's a very large battleground, and it's especially in height. Like, the distance between that top shrine and the distance to the bottom shrine is massive. Blackheart's Bay, very similar. And your enemy team has drafted Falstad, and you don't really have a great response to that global presence. Well, Brightwing is one of those better answers, right? You could go ETC with Stage Dive, you could try to run Vikings or Abathur, but Brightwing also can fit in that role in a lot of situations. So that's one situation where, in map presence, you just want to have that soak, you want to have that experience, and Brightwing might make sense in that scenario, but you have to make sure it's a draft where it makes sense too. Now, I personally feel that Brightwing and Tassadar are like a match made in heaven. When you take these, we see it a lot in competitive too, especially in North America. But when you look at the two heroes and you look at their kits, yes, you're drafting two supports in this scenario, but they kind of complement each other in a nice way. Brightwing has pretty minimal healing with her trait Soothing Mist, where it pulses every 4 seconds, but it's AoE. And Tassadar has the Burst Sustain to really keep your allies topped off with his shield. So just for sustain purposes, they have really nice complementary talents. Tassadar is, very good at giving vision. Brightwing can do that too, but that allows her to give up Peekaboo 4. We'll talk about talents in a bit. And on top of that, she also has Polymorph. Tassadar lacks any kind of hard control. She doesn't have anything like, or he doesn't have anything like Hammer of Justice, or even roots like Malfurion. And Tassadar really just has his own escape. He doesn't get control until you pick up Force Wall at level 10, which still isn't like a hard CC. It's just control of the battlefield. But Brightwing can go for Polymorph. Polymorph is good again. You can stop a mosh pit with it. I mean, you can stop tons of abilities, or just shut down the target for a moment to blow them up. And Poly is that option that you're going to want in a lot of situations. And lastly, they have good AoE, the two of them, right? They do a good bit of damage. Arcane Flare and Psystorm, stacking them, they both have strong lane clear. They both have decent AoE damage in fights. When you think of a lot of these newer maps like Infernal Shrines, where you're fighting over these shrines and you're trying to get the last hits on all these skeletal defenders, well, having AoE abilities like Arcane Flare and Psystorm is rather valuable. So there's a lot of situations where those two pair very well together, but it doesn't mean that Brightwing has to be played with Tassadar. She can work alone in some scenarios. Generally speaking, you want to have heroes that have self-sustain, Zagara on creep, Thrall with his trait, heroes like that, and Muradin, like big warriors that can heal themselves with their trait or something of the sort. Also very valuable with Brightwing. And you want to make sure it's not a smaller map. I think Brightwing can work on any map, especially when you consider Peekaboo and the amount of vision that gives you. And it's particularly popular on Battlefield of Eternity, just because of the layout of that map. When you can soak a little bit extra long and then phase shift in and get that Peekaboo on the enemy team in that area, it just gives you so much knowledge as to what to do. So those are all like kind of cool situations where Brightwing really does seem to shine. And let's just start to look at her talents and when and where you would grab various talents. Now, Unfurling Mist is an additional range on the Mist, and this isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't necessarily give her more healing. It just makes it easier to heal. And if you have good communication with your team and you have the ability to kind of clump up when it's safe and spread out when it's not safe, when you're worried about Void Prison or Maw or whatever might be coming your way, Unfurling Mist can be very good. But the most common talent that we see in competitive, and my go-to talent, is absolutely Hypershift, because this is just going to reduce the cooldown on your phase shift ability every time you pulse with the Soothing Mist by 2 seconds. And that's huge. That's huge, because Brightwing is largely about her trait. She's about her mobility with phase shift, but additionally, when you really spec into the phase shift, it makes her like a much more powerful support in a lot of different ways. Bribe is great, and like when you consider that she does have like this kind of cool global presence to kind of soak a lot longer than other heroes, she can get a lot of stacks from those minions. And then she can, just wander over to a giant camp and grab the giants. Let's say we're in Cursed Hollow and you grab the giants, you're on the left side. Grab your top left giants, and there's a tribute spawning in the bottom right side of the map. Well, that's going to have a big impact on the fight. You went back to base, you knew the tribute was spawning, you grabbed those giants, and then you phase shift into battle, and woo, yay, cool. We have additional presence on the map, and that could do some good pushing, and it's great in those situations. But honestly, Hypershift is just going to be much more flexible, much less situational, and give you the ability to phase shift multiple times during a battle, which in a lot of situations can really, really turn the tide. And that's largely when you get level 7 phase shield. Because phase shield, that's such a big, beefy shield that lasts for 20 seconds. Like, that's like a lifetime in Heroes of the Storm. And if you're playing with a warrior or a melee assassin, which is quite common, you can use this to initiate. And we'll get to the other level 7 talents in a moment. You initiate, but you can also put Peekaboo on there. So you got these 3 talents at level 1 for Brightwing, where you basically go, I'm going to grab literally all of the phase shift talents and make my phase shift as Gosu as it can be, just looking like this. And you have the reduced cooldown, you've got the big vision so you can see everything around you, so your warrior or your melee assassin, whomever it is that's going to be initiating with the phase shield, has exact vision of what they're up against. There's no mystery. So this gives Brightwing like a really cool power when it comes to this hero going on in. Oh, Yuge in the chat, a resident Brightwing expert. He's actually one of the, I used his Brightwing play this past weekend as a big reference point and inspiration for all of these points we're talking about right now. So hi Yuge. Feel free to criticize me, actually, and I would love that very much in the chat. That would be a new fun experience because Yuge is way more esports than I am. All right, you heard it here, boys. So level 4, what are the other options that you could consider going for here on Brightwing? Well, I mean, Manic Pixie is going to basically give you a little bit more healing because that one ally that has the dust on them gets additional healing for those 4 seconds. But, you know, does it add up? Is it really going to be enough healing? If you're going for the big heals, you probably should have drafted a different hero in this situation anyways. There's a lot of supports in the game. And I'm not too sure that this is actually going to have like a huge impact. Now, yeah, sure, if you go for shield dust or pixie boost and you're going to try to go like a bouncy dust build, maybe it's worth it. But I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think you're best off going for Peekaboo just because of the amount of vision and control it gives you, especially over objective areas, or Unstable Anomaly, because, I mean, it's a bit of AoE damage, but we talk about maps like Infernal Shrines, and you talk about having AoE presence and whatnot, and now your Poly's suddenly doing some AoE damage around it, and you could steal a few of those minions kills. It does add up over time. It's a very powerful talent, you know, just to kind of just add on a little bit more damage to Brightwing's kit. And I just feel like these two talents are the absolute go-to. Chat is saying Arcane Barrage is the only true talent. It certainly is fun, but I certainly would not call it the only true talent. Wow. Damn, you just saying all 4 talents are actually insanely good. So, in his opinion, Manic Pixie is actually worth it in some situations. Now, all right, maybe the healing is more significant than I thought. I'll take your word for it, Yuge. I really will. But really, what we see in competitive most of the time is either Peekaboo or Unstable Anomaly. And those 2 talents would be my go-tos for the pick. So we're just going to leave this build that we're building behind the scenes right now, full-on phase shift style, just because if you're a go-to new Brightwing player, it's definitely how you should be building her initially. Yuge is a Brightwing expert. Oh, wrong button. Oh, yes, we made it back to Brightwing. Mystified level 7 reduces the cooldown of Soothing Myth by 1 second every time you cast a basic ability. Now, this is kind of cool because you can get more pulses, and back in the day, she had an activatable, which basically was a burst wave. She would just start pulsing out heals when you would press D, the trait key for Brightwing. And Brightwing was like considered the top support in the game at that point. She was really, really powerful. That talent gave her just so much burst healing at the time. You could blink heal over to a target and then pop your healing trait and just have it go crazy. And this is kind of like what they replaced it with Mystified. And this is fine. Brightwing recently got a cooldown reduction, or mana cost reduction, excuse me. It might be both on Arcane. I think they reduced the mana cost and the cooldown in Arcane Flare. So that indirectly did buff this talent, so you can get a lot more healing. You can really spam those Arcane Flares pretty actively. And you won't run out of mana as fast as she used to, but Brightwing doesn't really have any mana sustained talents. Now, the cool thing about Arcane Flare and being able to spam it, not being able to keep your mana up, is that Brightwing can actually just hearth back to base, replenish her mana, and then phase shift back on in. So that is definitely an option, but phase shield is really hard to pass up in a lot of situations because of how much shielding it provides. Phase shield is just a mega initiation tool. It's a mega save tool. We talked about the power of this hero, right? One of her biggest strengths is her ability to be across the map soaking for whichever reason, and her ability to be able to save someone at a moment's notice. So your Sonya is aggressively trying to steal a bruiser camp, and 2 heroes come to challenge her, and she's almost dead. Well, you face shift in. You give her that fat face shield. Her whirlwind heals her to full, and you turn the fight around. That would not be possible with Mystified in most situations. You're going to need that burst sustain. And Brightwing really kind of needs that burst sustain in general. It's just too darn good to pass up. If you want to go silly shenanigans style and go for Arcane Barrage and Dream Shot, have fun. It's actually hilariously fun. You can just spam Arcane flares for days. It's just flare, flare, flare. You feel like you're just churning them out like butter. But you should probably go for Face Shield. And then Cleanse. Cleanse is always an option. 100%. Cleanse is always, 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 always an option. If the support has it, if the enemy team has a ton of control and you're confident in your ability to cleanse, it's a full minute cooldown, but it can absolutely turn fights around. If you're absolutely just desperate to get that off, to get someone out of a bad spot, always consider picking it up. Now, Brightwing isn't like, let's say, Uther or a lot of other supports that desperately need to get somebody out of the mosh pit so that they can then walk forward and, you know, be free to walk directly next to the target and stun him. She can actually just polymorph a ETC from across the mosh pit's radius. So she doesn't necessarily need it versus mosh as long as she's not caught. And when you consider that she has blink heal, if you're cautious enough, you can generally stop that ETC from getting you with the power slide and getting you with the mosh pit. But it's definitely like a little bit of a dance, because that ETC is going to know that you need to be caught in that mosh pit, or else you're going to walk forward and turn that cow into a sheep. And that is one of the most dishonorable things in the world. I mean, that is awful. I feel bad for cows everywhere that might suffer that fate. Now, level 10, we can talk about the heroics. Blink heal. It is just super powerful. It gives her mobility and it gives her a lot of additional sustain. So just in general, blink heal, her just healing goes up significantly, and chat, and it gives her a ton of mobility. She can now blink over walls. You know, one of the most interesting little battles I saw in a replay somebody sent in recently was there was a Li Ming going teleport build, a Zeratul on the enemy team that went Shadow Assault, that was chasing the Li Ming and Brightwing with blink heal. And it was just like watching an episode of Dragon Ball Z with everybody teleporting around. But yeah, effectively, I mean, even in a situation where you've got a Falstad or someone who can pass through walls, Falstad Murd, and jump over a wall, Brightwing can blink out as well. So it's just gives her so much flexibility in fights in general. Emerald Wind, on the other hand, this hasn't been in the meta in a very long time. I wouldn't say it's bad, but there's just few situations where you would actually make a ton of use out of it. Now, if we lived in a world where Bloodlust was common, Emerald Wind actually used to be a bit of a counter to Bloodlust, because teams would Bloodlust run in and Brightwing would pop Emerald Wind for a safe disengage. And it was kind of a cool back and forth. I think this ability will have its place in the game eventually. I don't think they need to change it. I definitely think it still has a huge power, because when you're stuck in the Emerald Wind, you're being displaced and you're pushed slowly and you can't do anything. So there's a pretty big window in which you can be taking a lot of damage, or the enemy team can be escaping or whatever. So it's definitely got a good ability in its own right. It's just really hard to pass up blink heal when Brightwing doesn't have a ton of sustain otherwise. I mean, she has a bit, but blink heal really does help buffer her lack of basic support. Now, looking at level 13, if you're going the Arcane Flare style, go ahead, grab Sticky Flare, have fun, be that troll. But honestly, I like all of these other talents. Now, Pixie Boost, it's 50% movement speed, and it decays by 20% over 1.5 seconds, so sure. It's gonna wear off, but it gives you a lot of boost, and I've always liked this talent. It's not super common, honestly, but to give that additional flexibility on a hero like Thrall, You think of Thrall, he already has Wind Fury. This makes him actually just nightmarish, but it's also very good for getting heroes out of bad situations. It's a great, great, great escape mechanic, and movement speed is not something you should ever underestimate. Movement speed is incredibly impactful in this game, and it could really, really change a lot of fights. Just give you an additional second to cast that next polymorph. Just got you just far enough away. So on and so forth. And you can stack that with Pixie Dust if you're going for it, or Bouncy Dust, excuse me. But Shield Dust is in most situations hard to pass up. You're almost guaranteed to be going against a big ability power hero like Jaina, Kil'Thas, Li Ming, Falstad, whomever. You know, even though Falstad's more of an auto attack hero, he still does enough ability power with his spells to warrant Pixie Dust, because that's 50% reduction on all damage dealt. And then again, you can get Bouncy Dust to get that on the second target. So that's probably my go-to for a support style, but you can definitely consider Ice Block. Now, in a scenario where you're against a Kil'Thas and he has Pyroblast, it's not a common thing, but it happens. You pretty much just want to grab Ice Block. Shield Dust might be able to nullify more damage, so it might be flexible. So honestly, now that I say that, you want to go Ice Block in that situation, I don't know if that's right, because I think Shield Dust could probably be, it gives you more flexibility to use that on other targets. But there are situations where you're really just worried about Sundering, or you're really just worried about being locked down or being blown up, and you want to let your next Blink charge regenerate. You need a few more seconds, and Ice Block could be good. But I feel like Shield Dust is the go-to way to play. I haven't grabbed Ice Block in a long time. It's definitely not extinct. People do grab it in games. I'm trying to think if Yuge grabbed Ice Block at all this past weekend. But I definitely think Shield Dust is the way to go here. I'm actually going to let Yuge respond on his thoughts on Ice Block, because I'm actually very curious now that we're talking about it. Now we're going down to level 16, guys, where there's actually, I mean, level 16 is such a great talent tier for most heroes. And all of these talents are actually so very good. So there's not necessarily a wrong pick, but there's situations in which each talent is going to be better than another. So let's start with Hardened Focus. If you're going the Arcane Flare build, you're going Hardened Focus, because this just means more Arcane Flares. Yeah. Ooh, Yuge says don't go for Ice Block. Nice. Okay. All right. Don't get it. He's like, just get Shield Dust. It's going to be better. All right. Cool. Well, looking at the other three talents on this tier, Greater Polymorph increases the polymorph's duration by a full second. Now that's big. I mean, you don't have to get any other polymorph talents at all. If you just grab the additional second against, say, like an Illidan or a Zeratul, you catch a Zeratul with Poly before he's able to wormhole back to safety, he is going to absolutely hate his life in that situation. So Greater Polymorph is a super, super powerful talent, and you should not underestimate it. On the giving or receiving end, it can have a huge impact on the game. Now, we talked about things like Shield Dust and Pixie Boost. Primarily Shield Dust is what you'd be looking at as that big ability. And you pair that with the bounce, well, that's two targets that are going to take a lot less damage. And especially if you're worried about, living bomb or something, I mean, that's really good. So Brightwing can sustain through a ton of damage in fights against big AoE damage dealers, Jaina, Kil'Thas in particular. And I definitely think there's a huge case for in those scenarios. So if you're facing like a big AP enemy team and you want to go for Bouncy Dust, and they don't necessarily have like a hard engaged melee like Zeratul or Illidan that's going to be really in your face. I mean, Thrall it's good against as well for sure, but those two are really going to be diving directly on top of you. Then you probably can get away with not going for Bouncy Dust. And lastly, there's Criterize. And Criterize is basically, that polymorph target is vulnerable. It has Hunter's Mark applied to them effectively for the 3 seconds. Now, if you could stack Greater Poly and Criterize, oh my god, that'd be so OP. But really, this is like going to be much better in organized play. So if you're quick matching, you can't really guarantee that Sheep's going to get focused as well as it should. But if you're playing in an organized match at a higher level, where you're with your buddies, you can call Poly and have that target that's critterized absolutely melt. And now Poly becomes a really good tool against, like, well, Diablo, as he initiates, you want to blow him up. Suddenly he's squishy as a tilapia. Is that a fish? Why did I say that word? So Critterize is really, 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 really powerful. It certainly is, but it's something that I would say you want to grab more often in organized play. If you don't necessarily have organized play and you're worried about those tanks and you're worried about those flanking heroes coming in, just go for Greater Poly. It's going to have better results at the end of the day. Chat. Now to level 20. Double Wormhole is like a cool idea, but I just don't see it being that useful compared to some of the other options here. And it's really not at all common. I can't recall if I've ever seen a competitive match where we saw Double Wormhole picked. Continuous Winds, on the other hand, is actually OP. And if you picked up Emerald Wind, then get Continuous Winds, just because it's so funny. It's so funny. Like, the dream is you go for Fallstad with Mighty Gust, and then he upgrades his Mighty Gust, and Brightwing has Emerald Wind, and you get Continuous Winds. Oh, that's the dream. But realistically, you're going to be getting Blink Heal. Now, Revitalizing Mists really isn't that bad of a talent. It increases the healing received from Soothing Mist by 25% for 6 seconds, and it stacks 3 times. So as you're stacking up, they're going to start to get bigger heals. And this makes Brightwing like a really powerful late game healer compared to her earlier healing. I mean, it has a huge impact on her. But it doesn't have the immediate effect. This is more for long drawn out fights where you can kind of disengage. And this is going to really just kind of let your team heal up and then kind of reinitiate. And that's the core idea of it. Now, looking at the other talents here, we've got Storm Shield and Rewind. Now, Storm Shield, that's burst sustain for the entire team if they're clumped up. And this is going to save people's lives quickly. It's going to give you a window to cast Phase Shift with Phase Shield in scenarios where, you know a target's getting very low. You insta-cast Storm Shield, you hit Z, you click the target, and bam, big shields on them, and your heal is pulsing underneath that, healing up their health bar under those shields. So, definitely a phenomenal option, Storm Shield. I mean, it's good on everyone. It's like the same logic as Malfurion. Oftentimes, you're going to pop Storm Shield right at the start of Tranquility because you want to get that buffer. You want to get all the shield on that target so they can live a little bit longer. And those heals are going to happen underneath the shield, and they're going to live for a very long time. And lastly, we've got Rewind. And Rewind is just super, super powerful. You can double poly. That's primarily what you're going for. If you went for Bouncy Dust, I mean, you're going to get lots of Pixie Dust cast if you can double Rewind that as well. So always a phenomenal option. Chat is saying Rewind to get the triple Arcane Flares. But yeah, and even Yush confirming in the chat pretty much exactly what I just said. Revitalizing Mist, Storm Shield, and Rewind are all very good options for a variety of situations. And double poly is pretty hard to pass up. Would have to agree there. So in the end, Brightwing's a hero that you're going to draft in a situation where you kind of need the global presence. You're really worried about hard engaged heroes, and you want the polymorph as a response to those flanks from heroes like Zeratul and Illidan. She is very, very good on pretty much any battleground, but I would say she has a higher priority for certain situations where it's like Sky Temple and you need that global presence, or say you're on even Battlefield of Eternity. Peekaboo just gives you such a ridiculous amount of vision over that area, and when you're going the Phase Shift build, you can cast that rather frequently. The final build that I'm going to give you guys here that I think is my go-to is actually as follows. You just go into the Phase Shield, you grab Blink Heal. I really like Shield Dust with Greater Polymorph and then Rewind, because the double poly is so very powerful. nerf all that ability power by 50% on one target. You know, just great. It's a response type heal. You're casting that when you see the blizzard crashing down, or you're casting that when you see the Kalephos living bomb about to explode, whatever it is, but it's going to nullify a lot of the damage received. Blink heal, just absolutely crucial for the hero, and then phase shifting all over the place just gives you so much sustain. I'm sorry that I clean shaved myself. I know you guys are all very upset with me for doing so. And tomorrow I'm getting a haircut and chopping off all of my hair, and that's because I'm flying to LA for the North America Regionals this weekend. So be sure to tune into that on twitch.tv/BlizzHeroes. Zool is next week, so that means Daily Quest is kind of being halted this week due to the travel. I have to fly early in the week and then be in Cali for several days, so Daily Quest won't be able to persist through that, unfortunately. But next week is going to be a very Zool heavy week of Daily Quest. As always, Town Hall Heroes continues on. We will have our next episode number 98 tomorrow, and Town Hall Overwatch will have episode 2 tomorrow as well. Town Hall Overwatch typically will be Thursdays moving forward, and I'm actually going to be doing Daily Quest for the Overwatch, a Daily Quest version for Overwatch as well very soon. So lots of new content on the horizon, but travel will be interrupting things here and there, so apologies for that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, or if you're watching live on Twitch right now, you can hit that follow button, and I will indeed be continuing the stream with some lovely Heroes of the Storm video game action. We'll see you next time. GG's.